Okay, so today is one last time on Wittgenstein and following a rule. I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking, what about truth tables? So, right? Okay. Well, just try and remember about truth tables for next week. And we'll look at priors, very short paper. The runabout inference ticket next week. Okay, today I want to begin by going back over the thing about global anti-realism that we looked at last time, and then pick up in this idea of whether there's a world out there waiting for you to find out about it. What the implications are of what Wittgenstein says about rule following for that. And then finally to consider the possibility of, it seems possible that someone could be, well, you can't literally be born in a desert island, if you see what I mean, but someone who, to all intents and purposes, has spent his entire life alone on a desert island. Couldn't someone like that have language? Couldn't someone like that keep a diary, write up what was going on? Couldn't they actually be using something that was just like ordinary English? Come to that. Couldn't they be following a rule on their own, independent of any community? Wittgenstein's discussion seems to imply that that can't be so, but it's hard to see why not. So let's start out by, this is Kripke on the positive picture of understanding and meaning. So this idea of an individual passing enough tests, the community accepts him as a rule follower, thus engaging him to engage in certain types of interactions with them that depend on their reliance on his responses. We've walked through this a few times now. You can just read that like regular English. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Pause me if it doesn't. Okay. And the success of these practices depends on the brute empirical fact that we do agree with each other in our responses, but there is no engine driving that. We just do agree with each other about that, and that's all. So this is a skeptical solution to these questions about what is understanding, what is meaning. It's a skeptical solution in that it doesn't try to find the fact about you that constitutes you knowing the meaning of the plus sign or knowing the meaning of any particular word. It's not trying to find such a fact. It's just saying, when we will say, now she understands, now she's got it, now she's giving this meaning rather than that to the sign. That's not finding a fact, that's just saying how we talk. Yeah, there are no facts about meaning and understanding. A straight solution would try to say something like, well, what makes it true that Sally means addition by the plus sign is that she gives the responses we agree with in enough cases. What makes it true that Sally has grasped the plus sign the same way we do is that in a finite number of cases she's agreed with us. That's not what Wittgenstein is saying. That would clearly be open to challenge because that would be consistent with Sally suddenly starting to go on in a different way. Yeah. So that couldn't be an account of the fact that makes it true that Sally understands a plus sign in a particular way. And he doesn't mean to be saying, it's a very delicate thing for Wittgenstein where this point about agreement in each other's responses, where that comes in, because he does not want to be saying either what makes it right, what makes it true, that 57 plus 168 plus 68 is 125, is that we all agree that's the right answer. He's not looking for a fact there either. He seems to be looking for when we'll say that it's the right answer. That's all, not what makes it true. And I think we looked a little at some of these passages last time. His interlocutor, his demon, says, so you're saying that human agreement decides what is true and what is false, and it's true that the logic of the argument seems to be pushing him to that, but he doesn't want to say that, it seems. He says what human beings say that's true and false, they agree in the language they use, and there's that background agreement in form of life. These are really puzzling passages. I mean, it's not that I think I can just put this in plain English for you, if you see what I mean. On the other hand, it seems important to try to see what he's getting at there. There's something importantly right here, it seems to me. But your task is to think what you make of this kind of thing. Yeah, I'm not trying to give you a straight prose translation, but the idea is that this background agreement in form of life is required for us to have a shared language at all, but it's not the case by case. What makes a statement true is that we all agree that it's true. Right? He's trying to hold back from that. It's not clear how far you can compartmentalize that. Not clear to me. And here's another passage. If language is to be a means of communication, there must be agreement not only in definitions, but also, queer as this may sound, in judgments. So everybody knows the guy who says, well, we must define our terms, mustn't we? You know, whenever you're trying to discuss, what do we mean by democracy? We must define that. And he's saying, it's not just you need a shared definition, it's that you've got to agree in particular cases how you're applying words. That seems to abolish logic, because logic is supposed to be a priori. It doesn't depend on your judgment about what you say in any particular case. But then there's this analogy. It is one thing to describe methods of measurement. So you could think of logic as articulating the internal structure of your method of measurement. Then there's the results of measuring particular objects. That's the application. But you couldn't have measuring at all unless you had a certain constancy in the results of measurement. Right? There's got to be that underlying constancy. And the underlying agreement between us is like that underlying physical constancy. This is your chance to complain. Yes? Yes?
But isn't it impossible that we can be consistently wrong about everything? Like, for instance, we can have some sort of language that is established.
We have an established language, right?
So it follows from that. But then our knowledge about it could be entirely wrong.
Everything we think could be wrong.
We have consistency. For instance, like you and I can agree that 2 and 2 is 5. And the
Right.
whole world can agree that 2 and 2 is 5.
Yeah, we're all just very, very bad at math. Yeah? Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's sufficiently possible for us to establish some sort of language, but it's insufficient to grant.
That's great. That's exactly what you naturally suppose, yeah. And that's what he's disputing. It's exactly that he's disputing. But I agree. Surely the meaning, I mean, when Descartes was thinking, this might all be a dream, yeah? Descartes was thinking, look, I've got my language, yeah? I can hold on to that and then entertain the possibility that everything I think is wrong. Yeah? That's one version of what you're suggesting, yeah? So Descartes certainly thought that was possible. Yeah, but remember that you know there is Putnam and brains in a vat. There are these arguments that we have to be interpreted so that most of what we're saying comes out right. Yeah, I mean this is one of the lessons of anthropology that in the 1930s, 1940s, anthropologists would come back from visiting their target countries, saying, you'll never believe what this lot believe, and then tell you various preposterous stories as to what these people believed. And then there came a second wave where people said, no, if you're interpreting someone, a people, as believing stuff that is really wildly, outrageously false, what that shows is you've misinterpreted them. You haven't really got it. And I think nowadays that is really usually what people think, that you want to understand the people from the inside and understand how what they're saying can be coming out true. So he's saying the foundation for that kind of approach is that you don't have a language at all until you've got this general unquestioned agreement in judgments. Yeah. And actually, I just as I say that, I realize that you weren't really challenging the agreement. You were challenging them whether it's right. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm sure Wittgenstein doesn't actually explicitly address
What's
this.
the purpose of language?
But,
Like,
yeah.
you can communicate, but
Mhm.
I would suppose that language has to say some sort of fact about the nature of the world. Like, it's insufficient for us just to communicate about something. Like, we have,
There has to be a grounding in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would argue.
That's right.
And it leaves that out.
It does leave that out. It doesn't explicitly say that. You're right. Okay. I hadn't grasped what you were saying until I came right to the end there. Okay. Right. So let's look at this again. I think the issue is here whether there is plastic. What? Where were we? Right, here we are. This agreement between us, yeah, the picture is this agreement between us is the backdrop that makes it possible to talk about truth and falsity at all. Yeah, it is what we say that is true and false. That's like the result of a particular measurement. But having the system in place, having the background in place against which we can talk about truth and falsity at all, requires this agreement. But that agreement is not itself really up for assessment as true or false. Yeah. That's the picture. Yeah. Okay, I agree. It's a very difficult picture. It might not be stable. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand what it means that there's a certain constancy in results of measurement. Is that just because what it seems to me is just like things don't constantly change size relative to each other?
Yes,
It's
that's
not
right.
like
I think that
it was
is what it
5
means.
inches yesterday, today it's 3 inches. Oh, let's pull the whole thing up. Like, this isn't useful.
That's right. I think that is the
That
idea.
is-
Yeah.
Okay, then I don't see what the analogy is. Maybe.
Well, I guess my picture is, and I agree that this is very difficult stuff, yeah, but my picture is that with physics, you need some notion of a measuring rod, some notion of a measuring instrument, if you're going to talk about length at all. Yeah. So you need it to be that a meter rule, for example, doesn't just arbitrarily change in shape, in size, I mean, as you move it around. Yeah. If you're going to compare the size of this with the size of that, you need a rule that is stable. Yeah. So you can't put it against this, put it against that, and then there'll be something predictable about you can read off about the relation between the sizes of the two things. Yeah. Okay.
But I thought that the idea was that when we're talking about language and how we
Yes.
go on, that there is no underlying constancy, or we're becoming skeptical about that idea.
This is difficult, right? There's an underlying agreement in judgment. Yeah. This is what Kripke calls, as I'm reading it anyway, the brute empirical fact that we agree with each other in our responses.
Okay, so
That's the analogy for the stability in measurement. So,
okay, so the thing that doesn't happen is that things don't constantly change size relative to one another, because if it did, then measurement would be
Impossible.
useless and
Yeah.
impossible. Okay, so the thing that doesn't happen in communication is that we don't suddenly disagree in our judgments.
that's exactly it. If you think of the deviant rule follower that we started out, long ago, the guy who goes 97, 103, 4001, 7, yeah. That doesn't happen, yeah. But that's just a brute fact. That the meter rods don't change in size as we move them around, that just doesn't happen, yeah. Since that doesn't happen, we can have our system of measurement. We can have our shared language. Is that making sense? I think that's my understanding of it anyhow. Yeah. But as I say, it is really hard to know if this is stable. This idea that you can talk about truth and falsity at, how should I say, the relatively superficial level of actually using language or getting the results of measurement, while keeping this grounding of talk about meaning in just what we do, this community view of meaning. And Crispin Wright, as I said last time, said, look, if statements about meaning and understanding aren't factual, then no statements are factual. If statements about meaning and understanding are just ways of saying, you've passed enough tests, we gather you into our community, we will now trust you to interact with us. If that's all it comes to when you talk about meaning, then you can't actually have determinate truth or falsity at all. Because if you have the meaning of S, whether S is a particular meaning is not factual, then whether S is true can't be factual. If what meaning S has is just a matter of how we deal with S in our community, then whether S is true can't be determined entirely by the way the world is. There's something non-factual about it. And to put it another way, the idea is, the natural picture you have, the picture that, say, Descartes has, is that the statement has a truth condition. You know what it is for the statement to be true or false. Yeah? That's what it is for the statement to have a meaning. That's the picture we had all the way through the first couple of months of the term. And then whether S is true or not just depends on whether that truth condition is satisfied. That's all it comes to. But now we've thrown out that idea that there's a fact of the matter about what it takes for S to be true. We're throwing that out. But if there's no fact of the matter about what it would take for S to be true, then how can there be a fact of the matter about whether S actually is true? And if what the truth condition of S is just underlyingly, at this underlying level, dependent on our agreement, dependent on the way we go on in particular cases, then how can whether S is true or not be independent of how we go on in all these particular cases? We can't stop short of having the truth or falsity of particular statements depend on whether we agree or not. Our agreement or disagreement is turning out to constitute the truth or falsity of sentences. But that seems bizarre. You'd have thought that the truth or falsity of statements about the Big Bang has got nothing to do with how our community is operating now. But that seems to be where the argument has led. And to put it another way, if there isn't a fact of the matter about whether it's true that 68 plus 57 is 125, then there can't be a fact of the matter about whether 68 plus 57 is 125. So even for these simple arithmetical statements, whether they are true or not is depending on our agreement or disagreement. That really seems kind of wild. Wright put it like this: a projectivist view of meaning is thus, it appears, going to enjoin a projectivist. Projectivist meaning it's projected by us onto the world. So it's going to turn out that all statements are projective. I mean, it's one thing to say, look, statements about colour, whether something is red or not, that's projected by us onto the underlying physical reality. Right? That's a familiar picture, right? Humans have got a kind of projector apparatus in their head, and those sensations project colours onto the underlying physical reality. Yeah? That's a familiar idea. And the picture there is that this projection is local. This is only happening with colour. The projection apparatus itself and the great screen of the physical world, they are really there. We're not being projectivist about them. You see what I mean? Yeah. But with meaning, if you're projectivist about meaning, then it seems like you wind up, if our facts about our agreement or disagreement in particular cases project meaning onto the statements, if that's how it's done, then it seems like whether the statements are true or false is in every single case going to depend on our agreement or disagreement. So the projectivism can't be local. It's not like colour. It spreads to every single domain. And you naturally wonder if that makes an ounce of sense. And because if you're going to say truth or falsity is projected onto the world, there must be facts about the projection apparatus. There must be some underlying hard facts that are describing the reality in which the scaffolding of reality in which the projection is taking place. That's where we got to last time. Yeah. Yes?
So, in the case of addition, I mean, you have sort of, it seems that we have a case there where we have a constituted or instituted practice in which we've decided what's going to pass for right or wrong. So we have a decision structure there in place before we actually ready to do this. So we've got agreement. The agreement's part of the process of setting
Uh-huh.
constituting.
But remember, all we've agreed on is our handful of initial cases below 57. That's all the agreement there is. I mean, you lead me on to the next thing. Remember this old friend, right? If you say, well, we've agreed, what we've agreed on is all these particular cases. You might say, no, I've agreed on the general definition of successor is add one. Then the question this is really at the root of everything, that this idea of the definition that we've all agreed on, in these primitive cases, it doesn't help. It makes no sense. There isn't something here determining how we are to go on. There isn't something here from which we can read off the right answer. Yeah. So the only agreement is agreement in these initial cases. And then what happens next really seems to be up to us. It's going to depend just on what, as a matter of brute empirical fact, we do agree on. There's nothing else that's constituting rightness or wrongness here. Yep.
So that seems to me Kripke's discussion of the type A and B and the tokens A and B. We have the token A and B cases that describe, union terms of constant conjunction of events. But in the type A causes B, we have, we extrapolate from the cases to make,
Right.
make a social rule, imperative, if you will, a social imperative that allows us to use this.
Okay. Extrapolation just means we keep using the term in new cases. As a matter of brute fact, we keep agreeing. And that's all there is. There is nothing telling us what to do. There is nothing we've agreed in the past that binds us to going one way rather than another. That's the really hard idea. I mean, my office hours this week was largely consistent of people saying, what? Right? But that is the really hard idea, but it is also really compelling. I mean, we've looked at this diagram, what, a dozen times now? So it's always nice to look at it again, right? But you remember that's the point, right? The X plus 1 goes out, right? It would really help me. Can you put your hand up whether you agree or not, you think you get the point of this diagram? Not bad. If you didn't put your hand up, can you help me by voicing your where you get off the bus? It's not that you have to agree, but you see the point here. Okay, it would genuinely be helpful if you don't get this to say why. Okay. Okay, so the picture is very natural to have is something like this, grasp of what the general principle governing the use of the term is like a cog driving what you do next. And that tells you how to extrapolate. Once you've got this, you know how to extrapolate. But the whole point about deviant rule followers is there can't be any such thing. Just if someone deviates in the way they extrapolate, this can't be any help. The deviant will say, but that is what I mean. I have just the same thing going through my head as you. So just when you would want it to help, it turns out that the meaning of this kind of general formula can only be explained by examples. You can only give your finitely many examples to explain the meaning there, and then say, ... and now go on in the same way. That's all there is. And then that means that the puzzling thing is that really seems to me compelling, but that seems to mean that there's nothing to which the extrapolation is responsible. Yeah? In office hours, there came up this example of, I can write a good tune. Right? If you think about Paul McCartney, when he was 13, saying, I've got it, right? I can write good tunes. Then I guess that was true, right? He knew how to go on. But nobody would say, that's a matter of he got the formula. Right? We all agree there's no formula, right? I mean, what do you say? What kind of thing does McCartney say? Well, it's just a knack. You get the knack of it, and then you can go on. But in these cases where you say you've got the knack, what you mean is exactly that there is no formula determining how you go on. Yeah? You can extrapolate, you can go on, but there is nothing like this telling you how to go on, controlling how you go on. Yeah? And the picture here is that even the simplest uses of language are like that. Just knowing how to count is like that. Knowing how to use the word red is like that. It's just a knack. You get the hang of it, and that's all there is to say about it. Okay, so then Wittgenstein really wrestles with this thing about the role of this agreement in judgments, what that's telling you about truth and falsity. But he's putting the negative point here like this. How am I to obey a rule? If this is not a question about causes, then it's about the justification for my following the rule in the way I do. So you say, well, why is it that you say 10, 11, 12, and why is it that you're so sure that the next one is 13? What's your justification for thinking that the next one is 13? Well, if I've exhausted the justification, then I've reached bedrock and my spade is turned, then I'm inclined to say, this is simply what I do. So if you say, how come you're so sure it's 13 next? You've reached bedrock, the spade is turned. Before we started this discussion, you'd have said, well, I know the general principle. That justifies me in saying that the next one is 13. But there is no such general principle to guide you. All you can say is, this is simply what I do. It's fine, right? But there is no justification. You have the right to do this, but there is no justification to be given. When I obey a rule, I do not choose. I obey the rule blindly. And you see the force of blind. To be sighted would be to something like this, your torch by which to steer. But you have no torch by which to steer. You just keep on going. And the brute empirical fact is that we all go on blindly, but we all go on in sync. And everything depends on that. So here's another way, right? Yep.
Yeah, just one quick question. How important is it that the empirical fact about our agreement is brute? Is it just important that, like, could you explain the empirical agreement on the basis of the desires or, like, biological facts about the persons or something like that? Like, if the agreement is no longer brute, if it can be explained in terms of other things, does that, like, become a problem to the account, or does it just need to, like, bottom out somewhere? That eventually we get to these brute facts that we don't have explanations for, that maybe downstream explain.
Yeah. The first point is that these are brute facts about what you're justified in.
Okay.
Yeah. There are two, if you don't mind, if you can bear to see this once more, right? There are two aspects to this picture. One is that this formula will cause you to use the words the way you do next time. The other is that it justifies you in using the word the way you do next time. Yeah, and I guess it's being argued to be idle on both counts. It can't cause, and it can't be the cause, and it can't be the justification. It can't be identified as the cause because consistently with having that in your head, you might be deviant, and it can't be identified as a justification. Yeah, because it only has its meaning. The progression here is what explains this, the meaning of this thing. So it can't give you an independent grip on how to go on, how you ought to go on. Yep. So it is important that there's nothing more biological, nothing in our desires or whatever, or nothing in our deepest animal instincts, nothing there that can play that causing and justifying role, that's where you reach bedrock.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you did find that, something that could play, you know, the blueprint in the brain that really does cause and justify you going on the way you do, then that would be a big problem for this account. You'd have done it. You'd have cracked the problem. You see what I mean?
Even if it's like not linguistic in any way.
Even if it's not linguistic, that's right. You'd have found the justification, the blueprint for the use of the word that tells us all how to use the words deep in the brain. Yeah, that's what you'd like, right? That's what would make things much more comfortable. Yeah, but the argument is there couldn't be any such thing. Yeah. Anything else on that, or anything else? Okay, investigation independence. So if you've got that idea that we're just going on in sync brutally, then do we really have the conception of a world out there about which we're talking? I mean, the natural picture is, I've got the word, I've got my blueprint for how to use the word, and then the question is, out there in reality, does reality match up to that blueprint or not? That's what it is for a statement to be true or false. Right? That's the way you'd naturally think of it. But then if you throw that away, what concept of truth and falsity can you have? This is a slightly different way of getting at the same basic puzzle about rule following here. Here's Crispin Wright. Okay, I was thinking as I presented this that, you know, in this class, you know, you start out with pictures of Darth Vader and so on, and to lure you in, and then before long you're looking at this kind of thing. It has to be like this because this is actually all just one sentence. But anyway, so here's Crispin Wright. Okay, actually it's not even the whole sentence, but anyway. Is it intuitively clear what investigation independence means? Right, the idea is that there are facts of the matter, and when we I mean, some people sometimes say in quantum mechanics, right, that in quantum mechanics, whenever you try and look at study the reality, the clumsiness of our probing jerks about the reality you're trying to study. You see what I mean? So that's not investigation independent there. But if I'm just looking to see, did I remember to bring my laptop or something, then you know, the reality is just the way it is, and then I find out about it. That's the natural picture. But Wright says investigation independence requires a certain stability in our understanding of our concepts. If you're going to think of the shape of an object, is not the shape of the object. What shape is this bag? Is not affected by my investigation. Right? When I look round, when I ask what shape is the bag, that is determinate, irrespective of whether or not you ever inspect it. So that seems to imply that there must be facts about how we will or would assess its shape if we did so correctly. So if you're going to say, what is it for the bag to have a definite shape? What is it for there to be something in the moon, a rock on the moon that's determinately round, a rock on the dark side of the moon that's determinately round? Well, if we did investigate in accordance with the meanings of the expressions in our vocabulary of shapes, the investigation-independent fact about the object's shape is a fact about how you describe it if you continue to use your shape vocabulary in the right way. Right? That's kind of a rigmarole, but you see what he's saying, that if there's a rock with a determinate shape on the dark side of the moon, for it to have that shape determinately, is for there to be a fact of the matter about what shape you'd say it had using your current shape vocabulary if you continue to use your expressions with the same meanings. Yeah, it requires that. But that idea seems to be what Wittgenstein has thrown out of the window. The idea of investigation independence leads us to look upon grasp of the meaning of an expression as grasp of a general pattern of use, grasp of the blueprint, grasp of the general principle, conformity to which requires certain determinate uses in so far unconsidered cases. So the pattern is thus to be thought of as extending of itself to cases which we have yet to confront. So that says to have an investigation-independent answer to the question, what's the next one after 12, requires that there be some blueprint here that the answer to the next question is going to match up to. If there isn't that, then if you take, I mean, if it's really like a really big number, you know, you take 5,000,003 and you say, what comes next? Is there an investigation-independent fact about that? Well, the answer seems to be no, right? Because there is no general principle governing our use of successor that dictates that, 5,000,004 is the next one. We ask the question and we give the response, but there was no independent reality that our response had to keep faith with. We just did it. We just acted blindly. We reached bedrock and the spade was turned, and we said 5,004, and that's it. There wasn't a fact of the matter about what the next number was in advance of our raising the question. And Wittgenstein actually seems to bite the bullet on this. Here's his demon, if I can put it like that. You see what I mean by his demon? You've been reading this enough that you realize there's this interlocutor that keeps nagging at him, right? So what you're saying then comes to this: a new insight or intuition is needed at every step to carry out the order ad n correctly. So at every step when you're adding n, you've got to have something new. What you did already doesn't determine it. There's no investigation-independent fact about what you get if you add n. To carry it out, and then Wittgenstein responds, if you're going to carry out the order plus n correctly, to carry it out correctly, what does that mean? How is it decided what is the right step to take at any particular stage? Well, the natural answer is, the right step is the one that accords with the order ad n as it was meant. And this is the familiar point. So Wittgenstein says, so is this right? When you gave the order add 2, you meant he was to write 1,002 after 1,000, or 5,000,004 after 5,000,002? And did you also mean he should write 1868 after 1866, and 100,036 after 100,034, and so on? An infinite number of these propositions. You know, when you gave the instruction add 2, had you already mapped out infinitely many answers so that now you can say what your pupil is doing is right, matches up? Well, of course you hadn't, right? Of course you hadn't done that stuff. So there's nothing for the order add 2 to match up against. You are just going to do this thing. And there is nothing determining what constitutes getting it right or wrong. And then the demon says, no, but what I meant was, I didn't mean I had infinitely many particular things in mind when I said go on, add 2. What I meant was he should write the next but one number after every number that he wrote, and from this, all those propositions in turn. So that's the demon appealing to like the x plus 1 thing. You see what I mean? Trying to articulate the general principle. And then he says, but this is just what in question. What at any stage does follow from that sentence, and how you to interpret that general principle that he just stated, what that means. Or again, what at any stage we are to call being in accord with that sentence. What does it come to that you're doing the right thing, you're following that instruction, and with the meaning you then put into the sentence, whatever that may have consisted in. We do talk as if, well, you kind of inject the meaning into the sentence, and then that dictates what you're to do next. And Wittgenstein says, it would almost be more, he does say almost, but he says, it would almost be more correct to say, not that an intuition was needed at every stage. It's not that you've got some fresh insight at every stage. It's that you need a new decision at every stage. The distinction being, an insight is when you're being faithful to some reality, to some independent reality. A decision is just something that's free. You can do what you like. So the picture that we're getting is that when you're going on with the series up here, your decision is free. There is nothing constraining your decision. You do what you like at every stage. We each do what we like at every stage. And the brute empirical fact is that we all agree when we're doing what we like. But that seems to imply that there is no independent fact of the matter about what the next number is after any number until we've actually made the decision. The decision generates the truth or falsity here. Yeah. So this is, I hope it's clear that this is kind of a scary picture. Yeah, surely that can't be right. But the important thing is, once you've got out the +1 part, it is very difficult to see what the alternative is. Yeah, anybody's natural reaction is to be scared, to get the vertigo. You know, if you really follow what's going on here, to say that can't be all there is to it, and then to appeal to something like this picture. But that doesn't really seem to help. That's the power. That's why this is worth discussing, because this doesn't help. We don't have anything like that to appeal to. Was someone raising a question? Oh, you okay. You elevated your arm, but that was all right. Okay. 1, 2. Yeah.
So do we really have no justification for our putting the next number?
We have no justification. That's what he's saying. I obey the rule blindly. I've reached bedrock and the spade is turned. I act without reasons. Yeah. Yeah.
We conform to this practice in order to satisfy agreement or to satisfy the expectations of our teacher or our world around us. So there is decision is affected by the fact that I'm attracted towards conforming to the agreed upon standard.
There is no such thing as the agreed upon standard is this, right? And that has no constraining power. If we remember, I described the deviant. Yeah. If we can all go whatever way we like. The only way you have of marking someone as deviant or not, because the deviants get this in their head too. The deviant says, "Yeah, I am conforming. I am agreeing." Yeah. And that's his point. Yeah.
What if I'm conforming to the imperative? It's a good idea to agree or not.
Oh, it's a good idea to agree in particular cases. Yeah. I'm just going to, before I find out, if I'm going to find out what the next number is 13, then find out what everybody else thinks.
I know there's a cost to not conforming to
Conforming here just means, the important point here is that conforming here just means agreeing with everybody else. Yeah. Yeah. The curious thing is that we don't have to first find out what everybody else thinks the next number is. We each of us make our own free decision about what the next number is, but we do all agree, in fact. Yeah. And if you say that can't be right, I sympathize, but it's the important thing is to see the force of this case. Yeah.
I just wondering, we have a community agreement about the
We have a community agreement about
about the practice is correct or not correct. So,
I'm sorry, not quite catching the last word. The community agreement. Yes, right.
We will have a community agreement to justify this practice is correct or not.
That's right. We agree, let's say 1 + 1 is 2, right? We've all investigated this at some early stage in our lives. We've all reached the same conclusion, right? The important point here is, it looks like in this picture, that was a free decision when we all said 1 + 1 is 2. And our free decision there is what made it true that 1 + 1 is 2. There was not an investigation-independent fact here. And if you take a really big sum that no one's ever done, yeah, then so far as our past practice goes, we are free in what answer we give to that sum, and what answer we give will constitute the rightness or wrongness of the particular answer. Yeah. Well, yes, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
It reminds me of a psychological experiment when only one subject is in the room, and then the rest of the people are actors, and they're asked to compare lines,
Yes.
the length of the lines, to see if
Yeah.
A is longer than B, or
Okay, so people will be affected by
by the agreement.
by the agreement of others. That is interesting. Yeah. I want to hear. We've only got a couple of minutes, and I would like. Yeah.
So it's similar to saying we have this set of base cases that we agree on, but our inductive steps are not strictly bound by any sort of hypothesis.
That's right. There's no hypothesis that could be binding you in what you do next. Yeah.
And a more basic case would actually be, how do we even know that there is a number beyond 12?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And what constitutes there being a number beyond 12 is just the fact that we all spontaneously decide. Yeah, there is. Sure. Yeah, yeah. But it springs into being in response to our probing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just wondering, would Wittgenstein's argument here just boil down to an observation of how we operate, how we use language, and how we engage in communication? Because it seems like there's still, and he acknowledges this, that there are still statements of logical truths, of measurement, that are
Yes.
independent and not affected by the way we communicate with each other, the way we use language. So it seems like here he's maybe delineating factor that there are the ways we use language, and there are these truths independent of how we're engaging with each other.
I think he would say that he is just describing the phenomena of language use, and that the difficult thing is pictures like this really grip you when you think about language use, and you say it must be so, but that when you think about what actually happens, you see that this is the right picture. Yeah, that's what's actually going on. Yeah, but I think he thinks this is, well, it's very hard to keep in place these different ideas, but if you think about that analogy with systems of measurement, depending on underlying physical constancy, he does think that you can have general a priori truths about the numbers, that the general theory of arithmetic is possible. Yeah. So he has to keep that in place too. Yeah, the general logic here is possible. We're over time, and I guess you guys will have to go. But maybe we'll make some remarks about Born Crusoe next time. Okay, thanks, guys.